Welcome to Guerrillapreneur, the art of waging small business warfare podcast, teaching Davids how to defeat Goliaths. Now here's your host, Mark Anthony Peterson.
Welcome back to the podcast for entrepreneurs, startups, and business mavericks. If you're not a maverick, you don't have to go home, but you got to get up out of this podcast. In this podcast, we teach entrepreneurs how to defeat the corporate giant. Just like in the story of David and Goliath, David defeated a much taller and stronger Goliath, not by fighting the giant in hand-to-hand combat, but by using technology, a slingshot. The slingshot allowed the smaller David to attack from a distance that minimized the advantages that Goliath had over the smaller David. My name is Mark Anthony Peterson. I'm a serial entrepreneur, a futurist, and the managing executive at Serial Consulting, a leading small business strategy and technology consulting firm. I'm also the author of the book Guerrillapreneur, Small Business Strategy for Davids Wanting to Defeat Goliath, which is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and iTunes. This podcast is brought to you by Serial Consulting. An idea can launch a business, a strategy can take it global. Welcome to episode 31, the Guerrillapreneur News episode. News about the sharing, gig, and circular loop economies that is expected to grow to $335 billion by 2025. Today we have some really exciting gig news for you. We're going to discuss how Airbnb guests don't spend as much in minority communities. We're going to talk about how payment issues are possibly going to kill the gig economy. We're going to tell you the best cities where gig jobs are. And then we're going to talk to you about the Uber of the skies. Yes, people are sharing their planes, and it has me excited. First in Guerrillapreneur News, Airbnb guests spend less in Black and Hispanic neighborhoods. This story comes from MarketWatch on July 13th of this year, where they discuss a partnership that Airbnb started with the NAACP to encourage people of color to list their properties on their website in hopes that it would spur more economic development. You see, according to Airbnb's research, 50% of the spending by their guests are done in the neighborhoods where they reside. So, if you encourage more minorities to list their property on Airbnb, more dollars would flow into the businesses located in those neighborhoods. Professor Mohammad Rohman and PhD student Mohammad and Alyakoob of Purdue University's Carnert School of Management published a study that said that in predominantly white communities, every 2% increase in Airbnb activity caused a 4% increase in employment in surrounding businesses. Their study also showed that communities that were 50% minority or greater, this spillover effect did not occur. Essentially, the guests at Airbnb properties in minority communities are not going to restaurants and local shops in significant levels to drive increases in employment. I have a theory about why they didn't get the pull through that they expected. Part of what drives the local demand for restaurants and shops are Yelp reviews. Yelp reviews give individuals who are new to a community the opportunity to learn from past tourist experiences. And by and large, many of the minority businesses are underrepresented on platforms like Yelp. And this is unfortunate because a 2017 Nielsen study showed that Black women are among the most influential on social media, including providing reviews for restaurants and retail outlets. Airbnb and the NAACP took a bold step by announcing this partnership and attempting to try to spur economic development in the Black community. Now they need to take the next step and take a full 360-degree approach and work with those businesses and help them get the right types of Yelp reviews and partnerships with those Airbnb participants. They need to be able to put literature in those homes so that they can make those guests aware of those local community businesses. And then they need to get the pull through to get those guests to actually post reviews on Yelp. And then finally, the NAACP needs to sit down with those businesses and force them to read those Yelp reviews, react to them, and then improve the service. All of that will spur long-term economic development. It's a great first step, but you got to get the pull through by having a 360-degree view of what economic development really means. I love what they've done. That's a guerrillapreneur move to try to create value. Now you got to walk the extra mile to get the dollars that you were anticipating. What's second in guerrillapreneur news? Libraries. You thought they were going the way of the dinosaur? No. According to staffingindustry.com, public libraries are reinventing themselves and creating co-worker space to cater to the gig worker. Now, I got to admit, my small hometown library in Selma, Alabama, has been doing this for years. There's one gentleman who is a gig worker who has basically set up office in the public library and uses their internet and their computers and a conference room table as his office. More public libraries are following suit, and that's helping to spur economic development in small communities where many of these micro businesses do not have the capital to invest in some of the business basics to get themselves off the ground. I love this guerrillapreneur trend. It also caters to the fact that people are paying taxes, and those taxes need to be invested in ways that spur growth. And this is cool and a great way to get that value by developing spaces, micro-working, co-working spaces that mimic what we see in places like WeWork in larger cities. Keep it up, public libraries. I use you too. For many of you who've listened to this show, you've heard some of my how to make $1 out of 15 cents episodes. And one of the ways that I post that you can save money is to use the public library as your personal office. I've done podcast interviews in multiple public libraries around the country. And when I couldn't find a Starbucks, I knew my neighborhood public library would have internet access. So public libraries, keep it up. Don't go the way of the dinosaur. Turn yourself into a co-worker space and help those micro businesses keep your towns alive. Now, what's third in Guerrillapreneur news? Want to make money off the gig economy? I'm going to tell you the cities where that's best to do. Based on information provided by Clark Howard and WSTV.com, I'm going to give you the top 10 cities where you can make money in the gig economy. Now, the ranking is based on how fast the rides and rooms, or the car sharing and room sharing economies are growing, plus the affordability of the city itself. So number 10, Phoenix, Arizona. They came in at number 10 because they have very affordable housing, and LinkedIn just launched a program that allows local residents to apply for up to 4 gig jobs at the same time using just one application. Coming in at number 9 is Miami, Florida, because of its per capita gig revenue of $16,000. It's the highest amongst all the cities in the study, and because of the city's sky-high rental market, it makes it a prime choice for getting Airbnb revenue. Coming in at number 8 was San Diego, because they saw a 66% jump in the rides and room revenue from the gig economy. Followed by San Jose, which came in at number 7. It saw a 91% growth in rides and room revenue from the gig economy between 2012 and 2014, making it number 2 in growth in the study behind Miami. What knocked San Jose down on the list? Yes, as you might imagine, Silicon Valley, making housing so unaffordable for people living in that area. Coming in at number 6, Dallas, Texas. It's affordable, and they saw a 40% growth in the rides and room revenue between 2012 and 2014. They also have a ton of places for freelancers to work, like WeWork, Common Desk, Serendipity Labs, and more. Lots of great infrastructure for those in the gig economy. Number 5, Washington, D.C. The per capita revenue for gig workers is $11,240, and it was the second amongst all the cities. The city, like Texas, also has a ton of co-working spaces, like Advantage, Cove, and Make offices. Number 4, Boston, Massachusetts. The city saw a 59.2% growth in its ride and room revenue, what knocked it down affordability. Los Angeles comes in at number 3. They had a 79.3% increase in the rooms and rides revenue. And Atlanta, Georgia, Hotlanta, came in at number 2. They had a 41% increase in rides and room revenue. That's the 9th highest, but they are also very affordable and tons of freelancer infrastructure like WeWork with co-working spaces convenient to individuals in the area. And the number 1 city on the list, San Francisco, shocked me because affordability, I would think, would be right there with San Jose at being very hard for freelancers, but they had a 93% growth in their rides and rooms revenue between 2012 and 2014, highest on the list for that time period. So if you're thinking about jumping into the gig economy, these are the top 10 cities where you can do that. Now, others that came in that were honorable mention: Minneapolis, Nashville, Denver, Chicago, and Portland. Now, if you didn't make the list, what does that tell you? As a small community, if you want to take on these Goliath cities, you're going to have to build up the infrastructure that makes it easy for gig businesses to take off and for freelancers to do their work. That means free Wi-Fi. That means charging stations. That means co-working spaces. You have to have an integrated strategy if you're going to take on the Goliath cities that are attracting more and more of the best freelancer talent. We're working on a white paper that we're going to post on Sierra.com for small communities, giving them the step-by-step tactics that they can deploy to take on the Goliath cities that are sucking all the resources and talent away from rural communities. You can fight back, but it requires a dedicated, integrated strategy that supports this new economy. What's fourth in Guerrillapreneur News? How many of you have used Uber or Lyft? You love it, right? Especially when you travel. How would you like to take that same concept and apply it to an airplane? That's what the UK-based Wingly has done, at least right now, for leisure travel. According to TheGuardian.com, the flight-sharing website Wingly claims to bring private aviation to the masses and giving ordinary people the chance to experience the luxuries of flying on a private jet or plane without taking out a second mortgage to do so. I remember my first flight on a private jet. I drove right up to the airport, walked 50 feet into the lobby of the plane and checked in, walked another 50 feet out to the private jet, and was on board in a matter of minutes. The seats were leather and as soft as a baby's bottom. The flight was like being on a Bentley with wings. I cried like a baby at the end of that flight, and I never wanted to fly commercial again. On the weekends, I drive out to the airport and stand outside the security gate and wave at the private jets as they come in, crying and wishing that I were on one of those as they were taking off or landing. The guys at Wingly are making it happen for the average Joe like me. They're connecting private pilots with members of the public so that they can share the cost of the flight. And as a result, They've been dubbed the Uber of the skies, or the Airbnb of aviation. Now, most of their flights aren't like the one I took on a G5. Most of theirs are pilots that fly small single-engine piston planes between 2 and 6 seats. So they probably don't have the cocktail shrimp that I fell in love with on my flight. They aren't providing business trips yet. They focus on excursions and leisure travel, connecting popular tourist destinations in France with places in York, Oxford, and Cambridge. Wingley has 3,000 UK pilots and about 10,000 pilots across Europe. Most of the pilots have day jobs like flying commercial planes, so it may take a little while for you to arrange a trip through their website. Flyers are warned that there may be cancellations for any reason, including weather, and there are no scheduled routes. You're just sharing a ride. More than 150,000 people have signed up to use the service, and I can't wait till they get to the U.S. I'm going to relive my G5 moment with that cocktail shrimp and enjoy every bit of it and not break the bank to do it. What's fifth in Guerrillapreneur News? According to Wired.com, Fair Care Labs, the innovation arm of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, which organizes and advocates for domestic workers, has quietly been testing a portable benefits tool that may help domestic workers who have long grappled with many of the issues plaguing the gig economy, like not having benefits or transferring those benefits between jobs. According to a 2017 study conducted by the National Domestic Worker Alliance, 23% of domestic workers are paid below their state's minimum wage, and 70% earn less than $13 per hour. Like workers in the gig economy, most domestic workers are paid by multiple employers, and none of them are incented to offer these workers benefits. So these domestic workers are a lot like these new quote-unquote gig workers that are emerging in today's economy, and Fair Care Labs believes that they're a perfect test case to develop these sorts of benefits tools and apply it more broadly across the gig economy. So Fair Care Labs has partnered with Colonial Life Insurance Company to offer life insurance, disability insurance, accident and critical illness insurance, and these workers can also redeem paid time off at $120 per day. This is exciting because if you can get portable benefits like these for gig workers, you'll solve a huge problem that could be a constraint on the growth of the gig economy. What's sixth in Guerrillapreneur News? The bike sharing bubble in mainland China and in Hong Kong may be exploding, which may also say something about how bike sharing will be used as part of a larger ecosystem to help other parts of the gig economy grow. Mobike was launched in 2017 by French entrepreneur Raphael Cohen. It was the first bike sharing service in Hong Kong and at its peak had 10,000 bikes. The company raised nearly $90 million in its first round of financing, led by Alibaba Hong Kong Entrepreneur Fund, and in a little over a year later, it has closed its doors. One of the primary reasons they cite: huge maintenance costs. Mobike's bankruptcy is yet another indicator that bike sharing is changing in mainland China. Since 2013, over 100 bike-sharing companies in China were launched. But now there are only two giants remaining, Mobike and Ofo. They account for 90% of the market share in the bike-sharing segment. Between those two giants, they've raised over $1 billion from private investors and backers from people like Tencent and Alibaba. From the outside looking in, it would seem that bike sharing should make money. Bikes aren't terribly expensive, and you should be able to get a reasonable fee per hour to get someone to rent those bikes. However, there's enormous cost that comes with tracking and maintaining those bikes. Each of these systems requires a GPS component to make sure no one's taking your bikes. And then there's the e-payment system that allows you to pay at the docking station before you remove the bike and start to use it. Then on top of that, there's the regular maintenance and upkeep of those bikes. That means you have to have a ground force of contractors or workers who are out checking all the bikes at docking stations and making sure they're operable. These additional costs aren't easily passed on to the consumer. So you see the weight of this business causes it to implode unless it's part of a larger ecosystem. Mobike and Ofo aren't profitable. They're being propped up by Alibaba and Tencent because these guys view the bike sharing industry as a way to gain more customers for some of their other downstream businesses, including electronic payments. So Alibaba and Tencent view bike sharing as a loss leader in order to get people into their ecosystem and selling them downstream services. For example, Mobike users tend to use WeChat to pay their rent, while Ofo users use Alipay. Alibaba and Tencent also use the data collected from bike sharing services to push location-based ads to these users. So bike sharing is that loss leader that gives them a ton of downstream value. And if you're a single-use player, you can't survive in this market. US-based bike sharing players like Uber and like Lyft need to take a page out of the playbook of Alibaba and Tencent and start looking at all the downstream data services that can be derived from bike sharing, including driving people to Lyft, as well as pushing location-based ads. I love the guerrillapreneur mindset of players like Alibaba and Tencent. They're squeezing the blood out of that turnip and getting the most value out of the infrastructure that they have in place to drive more customers, more data value, and more incremental payments value out of their ecosystem. And speaking of payments, that's what's last. Number 7 in Guerrillapreneur News. Payments could spell the death of the gig economy. According to Forbes.com, 73% of gig workers will leave a marketplace due to payment issues. The Forbes article indicated that Crowdsourcing Week and Shareable.net partnered together to contribute to a report on gig workers and their employment satisfaction. The report indicated that 73% of gig workers are willing to leave a marketplace if they are unsatisfied with the way they were being paid. Here's some of the data from that report. 97% of workers value being paid on time and correctly. 97.5% expect to receive notification of payment. 87.5% expect to be notified of the payment status changes. And 95% want to be able to access payment status information. What I find interesting about these stats is that the gig workers are saying as important as getting the money is knowing when, where, and how I got the money. And if any status in between changed about the money you're sending me. And if you can't provide that sort of data, these gig workers are willing to walk away from a marketplace and go to places that will provide this sort of update on the dollars and cents that you are sending them. You've seen this sort of data driving changes in the payments industry. PayPal, for example, has moved into the offline world by offering debit and credit cards to its users so they can access funds that are on the PayPal platform. That gives more of the client users an opportunity to use the PayPal platform as a means for giving status updates and access to funds in any way that their gig workers intend to spend the funds. So if you're a guerrillapreneur in this space, and you're launching a gig or sharing economy business, the first thing you start with is developing a very flexible payments platform or integration tool that makes it easy for the people who perform your service to get paid in multiple different ways or to access the funds in many different ways. And it's going to give you a leg up on the marketplaces that do not provide the funds in a timely way. Guys, I love Guerrillapreneur News, but this is the end of this segment. If you want to continue the conversation, follow me on Twitter at Guerrillapreneur. Guys, mark your calendars for December the 8th. Selma, Alabama, the Selma Business Pitch Contest is going to be held at Edgewood Elementary School, and it's the 5th annual Business Pitch Contest. It's like the Shark Tank for the rural South. I'm calling it the Catfish Tank since we're Southerners. Mark your calendars and be in attendance and pitch your ideas and help Selma bring technology and a fab lab to this community. Want more details on the Selma Business Pitch Contest? Follow us on Facebook at Selma Business Pitch. Please remember to support the show. We do have a Patreon page, patreon.com/Guerrillapreneur, where you can donate. But you can support the show by liking it, by subscribing to it, by sharing it and getting others to join the tribe and pushing this movement forward. Please share the love. Share the show. Guerrillapreneurs. Scott Sullivan said it best in episode 7. Be a mace. Sharpen those spikes. And remember, if you're not breaking something, your company might be the next thing that gets broken.
Thank you for listening to the Guerrillapreneur, the Art of Waging Small Business Warfare podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, you may also enjoy the book Guerrillapreneur, Small Business Strategy for Davids Wanting to Defeat Goliaths, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and iTunes. Follow Mark Peterson on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Guerrillapreneur. Now I want to close with a quote from the great Chinese military strategist Sun Tzu. Victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first, then seek to win. Keep fighting, guerrillapreneurs.